I'm sorry. I can't assist with that. The silence hung heavy in the room, thick like fog. Jane's heart raced in her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Alex stood before her, his expression unreadable. "I can't believe you would even think that," he said, the disbelief laced with hurt. "I'm just trying to understand," Jane replied, her voice trembling. Was he really defending himself after everything? The air felt electric, and she could sense the tension wrapping around them like a tight embrace. "I've been nothing but honest with you," Alex snapped, frustration pouring out. The words bounced back, echoing off the walls. Jane flinched. Their relationship hadn't always felt like this. Memories of laughter, shared secrets, and warm moments flooded back. But they were washed away by the storm brewing in front of her. Then, a loud crash interrupted their confrontation. It came from the other room. The sound was jarring, splitting through the tension like a jagged knife. Jane's heart dropped. "What was that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Alex's eyes widened, a flicker of fear passing over his face. "I don't know. Stay here," he said, moving toward the noise. But the urgency in his step didn't reassure. Jane! It filled her with dread. "Wait!" she called, feeling an icy grip around her chest. He didn't turn back. Instead, he dashed down the hallway, leaving her alone in the silence, which now felt more like a trap. She followed, her feet heavy against the carpet, each step echoing the pounding of her heart. She found him standing in the kitchen, staring at the floor. The sight sent a chill down her spine. "What is it?" she asked, eyes darting to where he was looking. There they lay, scattered pages of letters, photographs torn in half. The light overhead flickered, casting shadows that danced. Around the chaos, Alex knelt, his hands shaking as he picked up a photo. Jane gasped as she recognized the faces in the image. Her own sudden disbelief crashing over her like a wave. "No," she breathed. "What? How?" The world narrowed to those images, colors fading until all that remained was confusion and fear. "What were you doing with these?" Alex's voice was low, almost a growl. I didn't know." Her words tumbled out, but they felt hollow. Memories surged back, flashbacks of a past she thought she'd buried. The faces in the photos weren't just strangers. They were connected, twists of fate she never knew existed. As her heart raced, the realization struck her like a hammer. "Those are my parents," she whispered, pain twisting her insides. At that moment, a stranger stepped out of the shadows, a figure she'd never seen before. "You don't understand, Jane." The voice was so familiar, yet unrecognizable. The words wrapped around her, squeezing her painfully like a vice. "Who are you?" Jane's heart sank, instincts screaming for her to run. But she couldn't. She had to know. She stepped forward, uncertainty clawing at her throat. The figure took a breath, revealing a face that turned her world upside down. The truth hit her with relentless force. "You've been lying to me all along," she whispered, her world shattering. In that moment, everything changed. The betrayal twisted into something darker. Ties she thought were strong, unraveling before her eyes. Alex's shadow loomed, his expression unreadable, a storm of emotions swirling behind his gaze. And just like that, Jane's reality cracked wide open, inviting a flood of questions. "What else don't I know?" she thought. The darkness of uncertainty loomed, leaving a chasm between them that now felt impossible to bridge. What else don't I know? The thought raced through Jane's mind, spiraling into a chaotic whirlwind. The figure in front of her was a stranger, yet something nagged at her, a memory just out of reach. "Jane, please, you need to listen," the stranger began, but the words fell flat against the pounding in her ears. Alex's breath hitched behind her, and she could feel him tense. The silence heavy with unspoken words. "I don't understand," she cut in, her voice breaking. "Why were you hiding those pictures from me? Who are you?" The stranger stepped closer, an urgency in their eyes that felt all too real. "I'm not your enemy. I'm your sister." The room swallowed her. Gasp. "Sister?" Jane stared bewildered. "That's impossible! I don't have a sister," she whispered, the edges of her reality blurring. Memories of her childhood flooded her mind. Scenes of family dinners, laughter and warmth, but this revelation shattered them like glass. "I was stolen from you," the stranger continued, voice trembling. "I've been searching for you for years. This," she gestured to the disarray of torn letters and photos, "was my way of finding the truth." "No, this is insane!" Jane's heart raced, fury and disbelief coursing through her veins. "How can I believe you?" A flicker of hope flashed in the stranger's eyes. "You have." 2. You were adopted. Your parents wanted to keep it a secret to protect you. Jane felt her stomach drop. "No, this isn't happening." She closed her eyes, overwhelmed. "You're lying." But the truth pressed down on her like a suffocating weight. She opened her eyes to Alex, who looked equally lost. "Alex!" Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the front door, shaking the walls, cutting through the tension like a knife. They all turned toward the sound. "Who's there?" Jane yelled, her voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, the door swung open violently, slamming against the wall. A man burst in, hair wild and eyes wide. "You need to get out of here," he shouted, panic lacing his tone. "They're coming for you." "Who? What are you talking about?" Jane asked, her voice shaking. "They know about you. They've found you," the man urged, stepping closer, urgency radiating from him. "It's not safe. We have to go now." He glanced at the stranger. "You too. They'll want her back." Jane felt her blood run cold. "Back? Who's after us?" But the man didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward the door. "We can't waste time. They're already here." A crash sounded from outside, footsteps pounding. Up the stairs, voices rising in a chaotic din. "Jane!" Alex shouted, his voice rising over the chaos. "We can't! No time! We need to trust him!" she screamed back. Everything felt like it was moving in slow motion, the fear spiraling as reality slipped further from her grasp. She tore her arm from the man's grip, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Stop! Just tell me what's going on." Before he could respond, the door behind them burst open, and a figure stepped forward, face obscured by shadows, but a chilling familiarity in their posture. "Jane!" the voice called, smooth and sinister, washing over her like ice. "We've come for you." Shock slammed into her, breaking her resolve like fragile glass. Panic surged, tightening around her heart. "What do you want?" But as the figure stepped into the light, dread coursed through her, uprooting the ground beneath her. It was someone from her past, a ghost she thought was long gone. "Jane, it's time to come home." The words echoed in the room, each syllable a death knell to everything she once knew. Would she choose to run or confront the truth? The weight of her decision felt unbearable, and the darkness loomed, leaving her breathless. What had she stepped into, and what would it cost? "Jane, it's time to come home." The words rolled through the air like an ominous fog. Jane's heart raced, pounding against her ribcage. The shadowy figure's familiarity unnerved her, sending chills down her spine. "What do you mean?" she whispered, her voice barely escaping her lips. As the figure stepped closer, she could make out eyes that mirrored her own, filled with a haunting mixture of resolve and sorrow. Recognition crashed over her like a wave. "No, it can't be. Jane, Before the stranger could finish, Alex moved instinctively, placing himself between Jane and the figure. "Stay away from her!" he shouted, his voice trembling, matching the fear flashing in Jane's eyes. The urgency escalated. The man who had rushed in grabbed Jane's shoulder, shaking her gently. "Listen, they don't care about you. They only want to use you." She felt heat creeping up her throat. "Who are you talking about?" The door slammed open again, but it wasn't just the sound. It was the force of chaos sweeping into the room, followed by several figures dressed in dark clothing. "There's no time," one shouted, pushing past the man. Fear gripped Jane hard, and she could hardly breathe. "What's happening?" she yelled. "Who are they?" But before she could process, chaos erupted. The dark figures lunged forward. Alex shoved Jane behind him, his body blocking hers, fierce and protective. But every instinct told Jane to run. She needed answers. "Jane, come with us," another voice called, one she couldn't recognize. But suddenly, everything shifted. Without warning, a deafening bang echoed, followed by an explosion of light. The room vibrated. A burst of heat washed over them, and she felt herself thrown back against the counter. Choking on dust and confusion, she gasped. Everything was chaos. The ceiling cracked, debris raining down. All she could hear was the thundering in her ears and the sharp cries around her. "Alex!" she screamed. The weight of panic paralyzed her. And then a figure emerged from the blaze, moving with an unnatural speed. Jane's breath caught. It was a woman she had never seen before, yet a surge of recognition flew through her. The woman's face was eerily familiar. It felt like staring into a shattered mirror. "Jane!" the woman cried, her eyes wide with urgency. "It's not what you think! You're in danger!" "Danger? From who?" Jane's words came out staccato, confusion and fear mixing into an overwhelming tide. "I'm not your mother," the woman said, and the words struck Jane like a dagger. "I'm your real mother's twin. You were taken from us to keep you safe from them." The ground beneath her felt unsteady. "What? I can't. How could I not know?" But there was no time for answers. The dark figures surrounded them, eyes glinting with a dangerous resolve. The man who'd urged them to leave pulled on Jane's arm again. "We have to go, now." "What about Alex?" she cried, torn between loyalty and fear. But Alex was struggling, pushed against the counter, caught in the explosion of chaos all around them. The woman with the haunting mirrors of her face reached out. "You must choose, Jane. Trust me, or stay here. But if you stay—" Her voice trailed off, a shadow of loss flashing across her expression. With a final shove, the man grabbed Jane, pulling her backward. "We have no time," and just then, the cinder-like air exploded again, brighter and louder. Jane turned back, panic gripping her heart. But everything shifted. With a sharp gasp, out of the dust and chaos, Alex locked eyes with her, his mouth moving, but no sound came out. Then she saw something flicker across his face. Was it betrayal? Or something deeper? "Jane!" he yelled, voice raw. But before she could respond, the world around her dimmed, shadows swallowing the light, leaving her breathless as she realized they were not just fleeing danger. They were stepping into a truth darker than she could imagine. What lay on the other side? What had she stepped into? As the ground began to crumble, Jane felt a crack in her very foundation, leaving her heart racing in uncertainty. What if everything she knew was a lie? The world around Jane spun as the shadows closed in. She felt the heat of the explosion still radiating, but her focus was on Alex, his frantic eyes, the desperate fight in his stance. The smoke billowed, wrapping around them, and just as she was about to reach out for him, a deafening crash shattered the air. The figures surged forward, moving like a storm. Hands grabbed at her, pulling, shoving, and in that chaos everything blurred. The man's grip tightened around her wrist, his urgency palpable. "We have to go!" he shouted again, but Jane's heart was pounding too loud. "Alex!" she screamed, fighting against the tide of bodies. Desperation carved out her voice, but it was drowned out. Then, something cracked. The ceiling rumbled ominously, bits of plaster raining down like heavy snow. It was a flash of motion. Something caught her eye as the smoke swirled. The gun, metallic and glinting. She froze. The figure had a weapon, aiming it toward Alex. Time slowed. "No!" she cried, but the sound was lost. The world erupted into chaos. A shot rang out, and everything else faded. Alex's face twisted in shock as he fell, collapsing to the ground. "Alex!" Jane screamed. Her lungs burned with panic. The figure reloaded. Another shot fired. She couldn't breathe. "No!" she yelled, charging forward. But the man who had dragged her back, held her firm. "You can't help him," he shouted. But Jane was a coiled spring, propelled by fury and fear. She yanked free, racing toward Alex. The chaos blurred around her. But just as she was about to reach him, the floor beneath them gave way. Cracks splintered like lightning, and the ground collapsed, swallowing Alex and the figure whole into the darkness below. Jane stumbled, eyes wide, heart gripped by raw terror. The man lunged, gripping her shoulder. "We have to go! Now!" But then Jane felt something, a presence from behind. The woman, the one who claimed to be her mother's twin, stood there, holding something in her hands. It shone, glinting with a light that pierced through the mist. "Jane, please! You need this!" The crowd of figures surged, pressing in. "Stay back!" she shouted. "Trust me," the woman cried, her voice a lifeline. "If you want to save him, you need this." A sharp crack sounded as more debris fell around them. Panic squeezed her tight. "What is it?" she demanded, fear chasing her words. "It's a key," the woman said, urgency in her eyes. "To the truth. You have to believe me." But in that moment, everything shifted again. The figures seemed to retreat for just a breath, the room holding its collective breath, with the chaos hanging in the air. "Why should I?" she yelled, unsure where to turn. Then the man, the one who had fought to get her out, spoke, his tone now a hushed urgency. "Because that key unlocks more than just doors. It unlocks your past, Jane, and it reveals their lie." The weight of his words crashed over her, a tidal wave she couldn't drown. "What lie?" Mechanically, she turned toward the woman and the key. The truth, the very thing she had been blinded to, was unraveling before her. A tremor coursed through her as realization dawned. What if this key held answers that shattered everything she thought she knew? "Get it!" the man shouted, pulling her from her reverie. "We have no time!" And just when she grasped the key, a screech pierced the air, a sound that froze the blood in her veins. The dark figure surged forward again, and she realized, what if it wasn't just her past they wanted? Everything spun into madness again as the shadows closed in, leaving her one question, one dread clawing at her chest. What if she wasn't just the key to the truth, but to an even darker fate? As the darkness loomed, Jane wondered if uncovering her past would save her or consume her completely. The darkness loomed, pressing down on Jane. But the key pulsed in her hand like a heartbeat, a promise wrapped in fear. She could feel the chaos swirling around her, the air thick with tension and uncertainty. Alex's eyes were still locked onto hers, desperation radiating from his gaze. She took a step back, teetering on the edge of the unknown. "Jane! We can't!" he shouted, fighting against the crowd. The figures advanced, shadows dancing in the flickering light. But Jane couldn't hear them. Her mind was racing, heart pounding. Then that haunting voice broke through, clear as a bell in the chaos. Jane! The familiar figure, the woman who claimed to be her mother's twin, stood unwavering amidst the turmoil. "Take it, Jane. We need to go." A sudden rumble echoed from the ceiling, and everything shattered into motion. Jane's instincts kicked in. She had to act. She clutched the key tightly, turning toward the woman. "Why do they want me?" she demanded, voice shaking. "It's more than you know. We're running out of time." But just as she turned to flee, the wall behind, the woman cracked, splintering like glass. The shadows lunged forward, and in that moment, with all the chaos swirling around, a blinding light erupted from the key she held, sprawling out like fire. Jane staggered back, eyes wide. The warmth enveloped her, igniting memories, glimpses of a life she didn't know she had, laughter, the smell of her childhood home. Everything she felt she lost rushed back, and then, just as abruptly, it stopped. An electric shock rippled through the room, bringing everyone to a standstill. The figures froze, their menacing postures shifting into confusion. Shapes and shadows twisted around them like tendrils of smoke. "Now!" the woman shouted. With nothing left but instinct, Jane hurled the key toward the darkness. It pierced through the air, striking the ground with a deafening clang, before erupting into a kaleidoscope of light. But instead of banishing the darkness, it did something else entirely. "No!" Jane gasped as she watched the light swirl and pull in the shadows, sucking them closer, drawing them into itself like a vortex. "Change the flow!" her mother's twin screamed. But it was too late. A mass of energy surged outward. Jane felt her skin tingle, her heart racing. The light enveloped her, consuming everything. Her fears, her doubts, even Alex's desperate cries faded into nothing. Then the world shifted. It twisted and turned as if reality itself was being rewritten. And when the light finally dimmed, silence fell. The shadows had vanished, and the room was no longer intact. Everything was different. Jane blinked, trying to make sense of the scene before her. She was standing in a familiar but distant place, their old family home. The living room, once warm and filled with laughter, felt cold and empty. And there, sitting on the couch, was her mother, her face pale, eyes wide with surprise, as if she had just seen a ghost. "Jane," the woman whispered, voice trembling. Confusion gripped Jane's heart. "Mom?" But before she could process the impact of this encounter, the figure that had stepped in and out of shadow emerged, his face no longer obscured. It was Alex, but not the Alex she knew. This version wore a grim expression, eyes brimming with secrets. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you the truth." "About what?" she demanded, panic gripping her throat, heart hammering in her chest. "I wasn't just trying to protect you," he said, each word striking her like a blow. "I was trying to protect you from me." Before she could react, a tremor erupted in the ground. The room shook violently, and it felt as if the very foundation of her reality was crumbling. "What do you mean?" she cried, but the chaos drowned her voice. And then, just like that, everything exploded again. But this time, as the light burst forth, strands of memory unspooled in her mind. Dark shadows of betrayal, years hidden in secrets, a truth so foreign it made her dizzy. "Jane!" echoed her mother's voice, begging. But Jane felt the ground pulling away beneath her. She was falling, slipping back into uncertainty, into a truth more terrifying than she could ever have imagined. What did Alex mean? What was he hiding? As she spiraled through the unknown, her heart raced, wonder and dread colliding. Everything she thought she knew was about to shatter, and she didn't know if she was strong enough to face it. Would she find answers, or was this just the beginning? The world twisted and turned, and Jane felt the ground shift beneath her. She was dizzy, the memories flooding her mind like a cascade of color. Laughter, warmth, family. But before she could grasp the meaning, darkness began to creep back in. "Jane." Alex. Voice was strained, cutting through the fog. But suddenly, the room jolted like an earthquake. The walls themselves seemed to groan, shifting and distorting as tension thickened the air. "What's happening?" A crack split the ceiling, and dust rained down like a cloud of confusion around them. The figures stood frozen, eyes wide. But Jane was entranced by the light, the key pulsing with energy in her grasp. It flickered, bright and fierce, as if echoing her racing heartbeat. "Get out!" the woman yelled, her voice piercing the chaos. "They won't let this go!" In a heartbeat, everything unraveled. The floor beneath Jane cracked. Like thin ice, sending a jolt of fear into her chest. "Alex!" She turned, desperate, but Alex remained trapped in the shadows, his face illuminated by fear, confusion swimming in his eyes. Then, like a spark igniting a flame, Jane felt it, a surge from the key, a force that vibrated through her body. She grasped it tighter, a surge of hope mingling with defiance. But before she could act, a shocking blast echoed. Another gunshot ruptured the air. Jane's breath caught. In that moment, she saw Alex's eyes flicker. Horror painted his face as he fell to the ground. But not just from the chaos around them. He reached for her, while the shadows pulled him back, a dark tide dragging him under. "Alex!" She lunged forward, heart racing. "No!" Another shadow shot forward, colliding with Jane. She gasped, the impact knocking her back. The room began to spin, and the figures around her surged, their intentions suddenly clearer. It was all an ambush. "We need to get her," one of them shouted, voice cold and commanding. "No!" Jane screamed, adrenaline flooding her veins as she struggled against the grip. She needed to know, was this real? Suddenly, the room shimmered again, cracks in reality widening. The man who had pulled her away, urgency spilling from his eyes, yelled out, "We're running out of time! It's not just about you anymore!" "What?" But before Jane could finish, she felt a piercing pain. It shot through her chest like ice. She gasped, hand flying to her heart. Within the chaos, Alex's voice, a ragged whisper entangled in raw fear, cut through her. "Jane, please, trust me. I'm trying to protect you." The tremors around them intensified. A figure stepped out of the shadows. Sleek and confident, it was not like the others. This one radiated control. "Alex, you've done well hiding her, but you know we can't let her stay." A deep chill settled into Jane's bones. The familiarity in that voice wrapped around her, squeezing tight. "Let her be!" he shouted back, bravado masking his fear. But it was too late. The words barely hung in the air before everything collapsed. The key vibrated violently in Jane's grip, exploding with light, illuminating the room like the dawn breaking. And then came the shock. The figure before her transformed. Shimmering flesh peeled away, revealing something darker, crueler. Jane's breath hitched. This wasn't just a threat. It was a betrayal embodied. Because in that moment, Jane recognized the face. It was her own, twisted in a sinister grin. "No! What?" The ground fell away, panic accelerating. "Your time is coming, sister," the being hissed, wicked glee dancing in its eyes. The weight of realization came crashing down. Everything she thought she knew slipped into darkness. Memories woven with lies. Alex reached for her, but confusion clawed at her heart. "What are you?" The mirror figure laughed, a sound that chilled her to the core. "Your past is fragile, Jane, but I am your future." With that, the world imploded. Darkness surged, leaving Jane breathless and spinning. And all she could think was, how could everything she loved tie back to something so twisted? As the shadows closed in around her, Jane finally screamed, "What does this mean?" And thus the universe shifted, leaving her gasping in a void, caught between the life she had known and the reality that threatened to consume her whole. Questions spun in her mind, fear tightening its grip. What had she stepped into? What awaited her next? The ground beneath her felt unstable, and she knew had to find out, no matter the cost. The darkness pressed in, suffocating and thick. Jane felt disoriented, caught in a storm of crashing thoughts and emotions. Breath quickened as the twisted reflection of herself loomed before her, promising a future she couldn't comprehend. "What do you want from me?" she cried, panic bubbling up inside her. The figure grinned, her own grin, confident and cruel. "I want what's rightfully mine, Jane. You've lived my life, taken my place. Now it's time for you to remember who you really are." The room pulsed with tension. The shadows shifted, movements blurring, as if they were alive, ready to pounce. Jane's heart thundered, each beat echoing in her ears. "I don't understand," she pleaded, desperation clawing at her throat. How could this be happening? Just as she felt her world collapsing around her, a bright flash erupted, slicing through the darkness like a knife. The key blazed in her hand, illuminating the room. She squinted against the light, trying to shield her eyes, when suddenly the pulse turned into a violent explosion. Everything shattered. The ground shook, reverberating through her bones, and in an instant, Jane was no longer in the dilapidated family home. She was somewhere else entirely. A vast, empty space, filled with a brilliant light. Confusion swirled. Where was she? A soft voice broke the silence. She turned, breath catching. It was her mother, the one who had been sitting on the couch. But something was off. Her eyes were clouded, sorrow lurking behind them like a storm. "Mom, where are we?" The words stumbled out of Jane's mouth, fear twisting in her chest. "I've been waiting for this moment," she said, voice trembling. "You must choose, Jane. Choose whether to embrace who you've always been, or lose everything." "What do you mean?" Jane's heart raced. Was this another trick? This wasn't right. She could feel a tightening in her chest, fear mingling with something else, something dark. "Remember the past. Remember why you were hidden away." Her mother's expression twisted, revealing deep pain. Suddenly, that reflection appeared again. But this time, it was more than just a taunting grin. The figure lunged toward Jane, merging with her mother in a blinding flash. For a brief second, Jane felt an electric shock rip through her body. A connection, a memory. "No!" Jane screamed, clutching her head. Voices invaded her mind, overlapping, flooding her senses with images of a life she never knew. Her heart raced as memories of another family twisted into place, intertwining her reality with a dark history she couldn't grasp. "Jane!" Alex's voice broke through, full of desperation. She saw him reaching for her, but the ground beneath them trembled again, opening deep cracks that threatened to swallow them whole. "Wake up!" he shouted, fractured pieces of panic in his voice. Suddenly, Jane felt something shift. A weight, a burden lifted. The cascading memories revealed a truth, flooding her with understanding. She gasped, You're the clone!" The reflection twisted in shock, anger flaring. "You weren't meant to find out until it was too late." She felt as if the floor was falling away beneath her. Uncertainty gripped her heart. "What do you mean? Who are you?" Before the answer could emerge, the space began to flicker. Reality warped, the light flickering like a dying flame. "Your real name is Ava," the reflection spat, rage igniting in those familiar eyes. "And you're the key to everything." Cold terror wrapped around Jane. How could her identity be a weapon? Panic washed over her. "I will not be your pawn!" But as the last words left her lips, the ground heaved beneath her. Everything shifted again, fractures splitting the air with an unbearable force. And in that moment of chaos, Jane saw shadows closing in. Not just the figures from before, but a larger threat lurking, spreading like a virus. Through every connection she thought she had. "Jane," Alex whispered, urgency tinging his voice. "You need to get out now." With one last glance, She saw the reflection's face contort in pain, realization dawning like a cold, hard truth. You can't escape your destiny. And just like that, she was falling again, plummeting into darkness filled with unanswered questions. Who was she meant to be? What had she become? The ground fell away, leaving Jane gasping, yearning for the truth as it slipped through her fingers. Consume her? Jane was falling, lost in a blur of memories and fear. Each heartbeat felt like a countdown, pushing her closer to an unknown fate. The darkness engulfed her. But just as panic threatened to consume her, the ground solidified. She landed with a thud, breath knocked out of her lungs. Get up, now! Alex's voice pulled her from the abyss. She looked around, heart racing. They were back in the family home, but it felt wrong, twisted. Shadows danced in the corners, creeping closer. The air was thick, heavy with tension. Where are we? She gasped, scrambling to her feet. I don't know, but we don't have time. He grabbed her wrist, urgency flooding his eyes. The flickering light from the key illuminated the room, but did little to chase away the growing shadows. She could hear murmurs behind her. The figure, the reflection of herself, loomed nearby, whispering dark promises. You'll never escape me, it sneered, taking a step forward. Jane shuddered. Why are you doing this? Because you were never meant to exist in this world, it replied, voice smooth like silk, but laced with malice. No, Jane shouted, desperation rising. I was real. I am real. The walls trembled as if responding to her defiance. Your reality is carefully spun, Jane. You're just a pawn in a game you don't even understand. A jolt shot through her. What game? What do you mean? Then the key began to pulse again, thrumming with energy. It was building, louder now. A low hum echoed through the room, rattling the windows. That key is your undoing, the figure hissed, and your awakening. Suddenly the air crackled. A blinding light shot forth from the key, expanding like a supernova. Jane shielded her eyes, heart racing. What was happening? As the radiance engulfed her, images flashed through her mind. Families, different. Faces, different lives. Places she had never visited, but felt connected to. Memories she didn't create, but owned. Stop! She screamed, pressing against the overwhelming tide of emotion and reality crashing into her. You have to stop! And just like that, it all faded into darkness again. Jane gasped, breathless and disoriented. She opened her eyes to find herself alone, standing in an empty void. Where? Somewhere, and before she could finish, a loud crack rang out, echoing like thunder. The ground split open beneath her, sending her tumbling down. A spiraling abyss of shadows and screams. But something caught her. She gasped, startled. Alex was there, arms wrapped around her, holding her tight as they fell. I won't let you go, he murmured, fear mixing with determination in his eyes. Alex, she gasped, feeling a sudden surge of hope. But then, right below them, the darkness morphed into something dreadful, a gaping maw filled with sharp, glistening teeth. No! They tumbled faster, the ground rushing up to meet them. But then, shock slammed into Jane, freezing her in place. The darkness was alive, and it surged forward to engulf them. You think you know who you are? The reflection sneered again, and with a flick of its wrist, the shadows reshaped into something familiar. Someone familiar. Mom? Jane's voice cut through the chaos, disbelief paralyzing her. As the dust settled, there she stood, the woman from the couch. But she was different. She wore a sinister smile, eyes gleaming with something dark and twisted. I never wanted it to be this way, Jane, her mother said, voice dripping with false affection. Suddenly, realization crashed over Jane like a tidal wave. You're not... But the figure cut her off. We little pawns have great power. The ground beneath them rumbled again. Jane's heart raced. Could she really trust Alex and her mother? Why? She cried, feeling everything slip away. Why would you do this to me? Because, the woman laughed, the sound chilling. You aren't just a key. You're the answer we've been searching for. The darkness thickened, wrapping around her like chains. No! Jane screamed, clawing against the inky tendrils. And then, in the eye of that storm, everything clicked into place. The lies, the shadows, the truth. Her life had been a construction based on a twisted reality. With one final push, the ground split wide open, crashing into the void below. Alex's hold faltered. "Jane!" he shouted, but it was too late. She felt herself pulled into the darkness, swallowed whole by the truth she could no longer deny. As the last glimmer of light faded, a single thought echoed in her mind. Was she destined to find the truth or become a part of the nightmare? The darkness tightened around Jane like a noose. She felt her heart race, each beat a thunderous drum echoing her fear. But amid that fear, a flicker of defiance ignited inside her. The truth, no matter how painful, was hers to claim. "Now is the time," she yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos. The shadows hesitated, as if surprised by her boldness. That pause gave her strength. I know who I am. Desperation flashed in the reflection's eyes. You think you've won, it sneered, but the tremble in its voice betrayed its fear. With a surge of courage, Jane gripped the key tighter. The pulsing light grew brighter, illuminating the room, pushing back the darkness. I am not a pawn, she declared, her voice fierce. I am Jane, who I choose to be. Suddenly, the room erupted in brightness. The swirling shadows recoiled, shrieking as the light engulfed them. Jane felt warmth envelop her, a comforting embrace that chased away the cold dread. And amid the brilliance, she glimpsed a truth deeper than any lie. Her life was not defined by others, but by her choices. The figure crumbled into fragments of darkness, fading into oblivion. With a final flash, everything dimmed, and Jane felt the weight lift from her chest. She blinked, the light settling as the chaos subsided. Where was she now? Jane! Alex rushed to her, panic etched on his features. Are you okay? I think so. Her voice trembled as she looked around. The room, once filled with shadows, now sparkled with warmth, bathed in soft sunlight. "Is it over?" He stepped back, eyes wide with relief. I think we defeated it." But everything still felt surreal. Had she truly escaped? What about... There was that lingering question, the fear that the darkness would return. "We need to be careful," he said, his expression serious. "We don't fully understand what's still out there." Her gaze wandered around the room. It felt different now, like a sanctuary. Maybe we have a chance to rebuild, to find out who we truly are." Alex nodded, determination shining in his eyes. Together, as they stood in the center of the room, surrounded by a flicker of hope, Jane felt a twinge of sorrow. What about her mother? Was she truly gone or just hiding? "I have to believe she's still out there somewhere," Jane whispered, wishing for some sort of closure. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. "What now?" she gasped, tension flooding back. A door creaked open, a new path unfolding before them. "I guess that's our next step," Alex said, his voice steady. They walked toward the door, but as Jane stepped through, she felt a pang of longing mixed with hope. The shadows of her past would always linger, but so too would the light of new beginnings. What lay ahead was unknown, but for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. As they stepped into the brilliant light, a question hung in the air. What adventures awaited them next? If you want to uncover more thrilling stories just like this, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button to feed the algorithm and flood the comments with your reactions and theories about this shocking ending. And don't wait another second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to know what happens next. Your support is what makes all the difference.